No, I don't think. Yeah.
I didn't win this. I didn't go in here on the British flag either.
No, we weren't in that little one.
Yeah, we weren't in there either.
We didn't took on those ones.
It's kind of homey, this one, anyway. Well, you can't see anything else but
The table's tipped over.
It really sucks down here today for being Friday and a weekend. They don't have anybody here to say anything.
Huh. Oh well. It's so big, maybe you'll actually get to see them.
I guess.
What was over here?
We're gonna go see, huh?
Go in that little one.
I don't know if we hit all this.
We didn't go in that little house.
Go
Go the
this way.
Bruce one.
Okay, we'll cross with these people.
Oh, okay.
This is probably about the Confederacy and Fort Ford or whatever.
Hi.
Hi. Hi, welcome.
How we doing?
Good.
My name's David White. This is my wife Donna. We're from Wheeling, West Virginia.
It's nice to meet
I'm
you.
not going to tell you what college I graduated from. I'm not. I didn't. I'm not a historian. I'm giving you my best impression of something that happened in this period of time. And hopefully you will hear something that might interest you. She's got the first
This
part.
is the Williams cabin. It was built in 1789. It's from Cumberland Valley. It was taken apart there. If you look outside, there's little silver tags on the logs. It was taken apart there, brought here, put back together. And they had to label each of those logs so that they could put it back together. Kind of a fancy cabin for the time because of the indoor fireplace. At that time, most people were still cooking outside on a big campfire. So it was pretty impressive to have an indoor fireplace. Probably about that time, it was a British officers' quarters because they were the ones that got to cook inside in the rain. Everybody else had to find a tree big enough to cover everything.
Wow.
So it was a time where you had to do with what you had, and you know, a lot of the stuff that you see here was stuff carried by a man named Robert Rogers, who was from 1731 to 1790. That was the time that Robert Rogers lived, and he was most famous in 1755 when he was contracted by the British Army. We were all British citizens back then. It was before the American Revolution, and he was contracted by them to take care of the Indian problem. Indians were a big problem for the colonies at that time, and they were constantly raiding. Now in this area, in Bedford, Indians were not so much of a problem. They were pretty friendly with us and shared a lot of their knowledge with us, which we were very grateful for because, you know, we're coming to a new country. People get sick. We don't know, is this tree poisonous? How do I deal with this? You know, how do I do that? So we relied on the Indians. They shared a lot with us. Robert's Rangers were started. They were the first special forces. You've heard of special forces in the Army Rangers now. Same sort of concept. The British Army in their red coats, they heard the British red coats, they would come in to fight an enemy in their red coats, marching in a single file with their drum and their buglers and their fife players, and they expected their enemies to line up each take turns. It's my turn to take a shot now. Now it's your turn to take a shot. And, and they were really struggling fighting the Indians, who did not wear red coats, who did not line up, who did not take their turn. So the Indians popped out of the woods. They swung down from trees. They used these weapons, the tomahawks. They were uncivilized, and they needed someone that could fight like the Indians to defeat them. So the British Army hired Robert Rogers. They said raise a company to fight these Indians, take care of them. And they were most famous for their attack on an Indian village in upstate New York called St. Francis. Now, they carried everything that they had. They didn't have a battalion behind them bringing them food. They had to carry whatever they had. They had to use what was around them, and that was one of the things that they were famous for. Is they would be offered a ration. The ration was a pound of meat, a pound of flour, and a pound of either peas or beans. Well, that's not a whole lot of food. So, they were expected to hunt along the way or fish and to make up for their rations, but they carried parched corn, which is kind of looks like popcorn, but doesn't have the water content that popcorn has. If you throw this in a fire, it's not going to pop. So they carry that. They carry salt. Salt was really important because they could preserve meat with it. It was used as an antiseptic. If they got a cut, they rub that salt into it. It'll burn like crazy, but it won't get infected. It carried sugar, and they used salt and sugar just like we do to season food. And then they carried hardtack. Kind of like a cracker, but a lot harder. It's just flour, water, and salt. Form it into a dough and bake it. They would make a softer version called ash cake, which is like a pancake batter that they just pour right into the ashes of the fire and let it cook. And it was almost like a biscuit consistency. But this hardtack is shelf stable. They have pieces in the Gettysburg Museum from 1865 that are still there, still can eat it. The thing with Robert's Rangers is they carried it along in their bag. It isn't like they had a Ziploc bag that they could put it in or a waterproof backpack. Everything had a bag. Their knives had a sheath. Their tobacco had a little bag. Their flint and steel had a bag. So they'd carry their food in their bag. They're getting it rained on. They're crossing creeks and stuff. This would get wet. As it got wet, it would just like lay in the bottom of the bag. And after a while, just like bread, if you leave it out long enough, it's going to get moldy. It's going to get bugs. They still ate it anyway because they're hungry. They did what they had to do.
So they survived.
Yeah, it's a survival food. No, they said that for us not to let people upstairs. Robert's Rangers were basically farmers, so they all had their weapons. It'd be like that, something like this, a flintlock rifle. It's a smooth bore. That's important because there's no rifling, which means when they ran out of their little lead balls, they could shove some rocks down in there. They could shove some nails down in there, whatever they had. Anything that they could put down there with some wadding and some gunpowder, they could shoot.
Oh, it's heavy.
It is very heavy.
Nails out there?
There's a book out there on the trade blanket. Louis Wetzel's pretty famous down in our neck of the woods, down in Wheeling, West Virginia. He was called by the Indians Death Wind, and he was most noted for being able to load this on the run from Indians.
Wow.
And it has some